Hi everybody, this is Quotidian Light, aka Maya. This is a writer's vlog number 2. I just want to give you an update of what I've been doing and why I just keep failing at Camp NaNoWriMo. This is the third time I've tried Camp NaNoWriMo, and all 3 times I have not finished. And this time I just abandoned it. I just said, okay, this isn't working for me, and I need to stop off. The first time I tried to do Camp NaNoWriMo, I just wasn't feeling it. The second time I attempted to do Camp NaNoWriMo, I was doing outline. I got a lot of work done, but I didn't finish it. But I did get a lot of work done. It was what I would consider a successful Camp NaNoWriMo for me. But it was nowhere near what my initial goal was. And I think it's partially the time of year that it falls on. You know, that time of year, I was still in the mode from writing from NaNoWriMo, and I just couldn't like reset my brain. And every time I would start to write, do my Camp NaNoWriMo project, I realized that I'm working on too many things right now. Like, spring is not when I write new content, and I don't know what that is. I'm noticing as I'm writing that there's like a cyclical schedule that kind of falls with my circadian rhythm. I find myself writing a lot of raw words in winter, both leading up to NaNoWriMo and NaNoWriMo. And then there goes my phone. And then in spring, I'm like in editing mode, and I'm reading a lot of I have this urge to read, and I'm really editing and going in and doing deep work on the stuff that I've written previously or even the year before. And then summer hits and I start wanting to do more new content. And it's like this circle that I go through, and Camp NaNoWriMo never falls on the right time. But I was really hopeful for this Camp NaNoWriMo because I was feeling that urge to create new content. And even though I knew I wasn't ready to work on a new project, I felt like this would be an optimal time to do a deep revision of my novel, because it kind of feels like new content, like that thing's a mess. And so as I got into it, I realized it was really stupid of me to do this because in addition to Camp NaNoWriMo, in the month of July, this is the month that I'm going to have my writers conference. And as part of my writers conference, I am reading and marking up 12 manuscripts. There is no way that I'm going to get through all these if I'm editing my novel or if I'm writing any new words. Like, all of my brain power is in here. It's taking everything I've got just to read the short story that I read every week for Literary Roadhouse. My brain power is really being sucked up right now by reading and marking up these stories. It's not something I'm good at. It's not something that I've had a lot of practice in. And I've had some practice on Scribblefile, but it's different. And I'm running into a lot of internal stuff because when I won the scholarship to go, it was based on my short story. Well, that was a short story that I had edited like a gazillion times. I had worked that story within like an inch of its life. And then when I decided to choose the manuscript to submit for the workshop, I chose the first couple chapters of my novel, Past. And I chose that because it was the cleanest of my 2 large projects. And I thought I can get help on my short stories in a lot of different places. But I felt like it would be a really safe place, a really good place for me to have the first set of eyes on those first chapters that aren't my own. Like, no one has read those first 3 chapters except for me. And so I thought that was a good opportunity. And so I'm reading these. I'm like, oh my goodness, I should have worked on it more. I should have edited it more. I'm so embarrassed. Mine's not as good as this, which is all just bullcrap. Because, I mean, seriously, it's the first 3 chapters of my novel. I've only gone over it once, and I didn't go over it for like a deep revision. I went over it to make sure it was readable. And frankly, I think there's a lot of good things in it. It just needs a lot of work. And I don't want, the reason why I submitted it the way I did was because I was afraid that as I did that revision, I might accidentally lose some of the things that were good about it. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize with critiquing. If you're your critique partner, when you write down this part is good, this part is exciting, you're not just doing that to like make the other stuff easier to swallow. Like seriously, those remarks are huge neon flags, because what happens a lot of times is when you're reading all the negative stuff, you go to change that stuff and you end up accidentally removing some of the stuff that was good about the piece of work. So when you're critiquing work, make sure that you notate, just as importantly, the parts that are working, the parts that suck you in, the parts that you find interesting, the parts that make you like if a part makes you giggle, write down, this part made me giggle. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's not the response the writer wanted. So write those responses down. If a part makes you tense, this part makes me tense. If a part makes your eyes wander and you suddenly want to go downstairs and do dishes, like you kind of need to notate that. But that was like the main thing, the main reason why I submitted the piece of work I submitted. But I'm realizing that I'm in a class with a lot of good writers. I'm going to learn so much. I'm actually really, really excited about it. I'm just nervous because it's the first time I've ever done anything like this. You know, I've been in a workshop for poetry, and it was very different. It wasn't, I would say, the craft. Like when I was in a workshop for poetry, I never felt like I was like the member that needed the most help. I never felt like I knew that some of my craft wasn't right on, but I was very confident in my work. And I'm not as confident in this. And I think it's because I have such a high standard for where I want that book to be. I know what I want it to be. I know that I know a lot of the skills that I'm lacking. Like if you were to set me down and say, where do you need most help on your writing? I could probably give you a pretty accurate list of what I need. And because of that, it comes off that I'm just being insecure or modest. But no, it's not. It's that my standard for my work is here. My taste is here. But my skill level's here. And, you know, I was talking to somebody in my writers group about books where it's really, really well written, but the story sucks. Like you see that a lot in some literary fiction where it's like the writing, the mechanics is just beautiful, beautiful writing, beautiful mechanics. And the story itself is just uninteresting, doesn't hold your attention. You don't want to finish it. And we were talking about that. And then conversely, about a lot of stories where the story is amazing, but the writing sucks. And a lot of times if the story's amazing and the writing sucks, those books can still become like super, super popular. Just take a look on BookTube. A lot of the most popular books are actually not well written, but the stories pull you in so strongly that it doesn't matter. Well, I'm looking at my novel and I don't want that to be my story. I want the story to be here. And I want the writing level to be here too. And all of this is in practice for the great book that I have like in my back of my head somewhere that I'm probably going to write when I'm 70. I want to be a good writer. And he was like, it doesn't really matter. The story's good. Why are you stressing? And my thought is, like the book, you know, that I just finished reading, I want to write one good sentence. I want to read the book and think, wow, this was tightly written. This was beautifully written. This was finely crafted. In addition to, this was an interesting story. For Literary Roadhouse, we just read a short story, Safe Somewhere, Let me see if you can see that. By Bard Harper. It's on Carve magazine. This is the story that we're going to be discussing tomorrow. And one of the things that I really liked about that short story, and so far about all the short stories that we've read that I have rated 4 and above, I've noticed that there's like a theme in the short stories that I rate that highly. And it is there's a level of craft on a sentence by sentence basis that's just immaculate. And the thought of doing that on like a large scale, like a novel, suddenly I understand why some literary novelists can take 5-10 years to finish a book. Because, like, seriously, one of the short stories that's out for submission right now, I spent 7 months editing that short story. The short story was probably 7,000 words. It wasn't very long. But, and I know that as I get better, I'll get faster. But I say that as an example of what my goal is to, write and have every sentence have its place. Every word feel like that is the right word. In addition to having an amazing plot and good characters and strong development and suspense and all that, I want the actual writing itself to be that beautiful. And maybe it's because I come from a poetry background. I read a lot of poetry as a teenager. I wrote a lot of poetry as a teen and early 20s. And while I was never very good, I think that it's influenced me as far as how I read books and the books that I admire. And you kind of want to write books that you admire. You know what I mean? You don't want to write books that you don't respect. Like, if you don't like romance books, don't write romance books. Like, you can kind of tell if you love that genre and you write in that genre and you write books that you would want to read, books that you would admire, then you're going to be happy with yourself as a writer. And I feel that way about the books that I admire. I've got several. Right now, I finally started Inheritance. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. A lot of the classics, a lot of poetry. Like, those are the books that I admire. I do read, some of the lighter fare, some of the books that have really strong plot and maybe not the best writing, but they don't tend to stick with me. Like, if you were to ask me right now, the plot of Genius Squad, which I enjoyed. It was like a silly young adult set of books that I just loved the living daylights out of. Might even have been middle grade. I couldn't tell you the plot. Could not tell you. Hunger Games, if it weren't for the movies, I couldn't tell you the plot of Hunger Games. The books that I remember tend to be books that made me think as I read them. Books that I read and I purely experience them as if I was reading the TV don't tend to stick with me. I forget them within days of finishing, sometimes even hours of finishing. There have been a few books that I have finished the book, said to my daughter, "You would like this," and she will say, "What's it about?" And I'll be like, "You know what? I really couldn't summarize it for you, but you should read it because it was a lot of fun, but couldn't tell you beyond like, boy and a girl." So that's what I've been doing. Doing a lot of marking up. It, I didn't think it was going to be as big of a job since I had done so much work on Scribophile. And I find myself, I think it's because I know that my book is so rough, I feel a responsibility to really, really get in deep with these markups. And I think that's partially what's taking me so darn long and partially why Camp NaNoWriMo is a fail for me. But if I'm completely frank, Camp NaNoWriMo is always a fail for me. I always do good at NaNoWriMo and then just completely fall on my face for Camp NaNoWriMo. So who am I kidding? Ciao.